Yeah, well, I'll record it now. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's Fez Friends and Ukraine brought us together, and
Yes.
the topic brought us up. And I'm really interested because I talk about the military stuff, and we're just getting this YouTube up and going. And I thought I'd ring you and see if get a diplomatic view of this, what's been happening, because I can shout it from the rooftops, but everybody else is, I want somebody who's a bit more sort of in that sort of sphere to really give their point of view of what they've seen over the last week. So, but
Or an
firstly, if
un
you,
or an undiplomatic view, as
I
I
don't
like
know.
to give.
Yeah, that's what I like
Yeah.
about you, to be honest. You make me want to go and bayonet charge the Russians again when I after 30 minutes with you. It's like,
Right.
um,
Let's see what we can achieve on the Pinner scale today.
well, I just want you to introduce yourself first so everyone knows who you are and what you've
Yeah,
done and where you've
absolutely
been.
happy to
And
do that.
great, thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. So I'll go off on that. Hello, Shaun. Delighted to be with you. My name is Cormac Smith. I served for 2 years between 2016 and 2018 as a British diplomat. I was embedded in Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, working directly with Pavlo Klimkin when he was foreign minister as a strategic communications advisor. And I worked with several other government ministries that year as well, including other bodies. Suffice it to say, I fell in love with Ukraine. Got to know an awful lot more about what goes on between Ukraine and Russia, and kept in touch after I left Kiev, and indeed after I left the British government. And when this war broke out, I thought probably being a professional communicator all my life, the best thing that I could do from the comfort of my home in London was to fight in the information sphere. So over the last, I don't know, 3.5 years, I've probably put about 400 radio, TV interviews and podcasts under my belt, really trying to give a informed view of what's happening to bust Russian lies and disinformation any chance I get. And as I always say to journalists or producers when I meet them first, if you're looking for a commentator who is neutral and sits on the fence, I'm not the person to talk to. I am squarely on Ukraine's side. But as I say, the objective is to give honest, informed um, commentary, and to counteract the fire hose of falsehoods that comes out of the Kremlin on a daily basis. That's
Absolutely.
me.
Yeah, I'm the same. I still pick out Ukraine's faults, and where they go wrong, like mobilization. I'm a big critic of that, and where we sit now currently, the faults of Ukraine. I'm more than happy to talk about those as well. But yeah, like you say, I am Ukrainian, and I do support Ukraine. But I mean, what I want to look at this podcast is really about not so much Ukraine, because that gets so much time. It takes the oxygen out of the room. You talk about Trump, that takes the oxygen out of the room. We had, well, before Trump was inaugurated, we had sort of 12 hours of Putin and you had 12 hours off. And then suddenly, Trump's been inaugurated, elected and inaugurated. Now he's president. You just get 24 hours of shit every day. You never get a break. And it's like you wake up and it's there, and you go to bed, it's there. And so, but I want to talk about, I don't think it gets talked about enough. Russia's precarious situation. I think we always look inwards towards Ukraine because the journalists don't have the same exposure to, into Russia as they have with Ukraine. I think I would say I don't know if you agree, but 70% of the news is focused solely on Ukraine. And I think we've overestimated Russia's capabilities and underestimated Ukrainians.
Mhm.
What I want to do is really look at the last couple of weeks. Well, I could talk to you for hours, but we're going to do it for 30, 40 minutes. We can always talk again. I want to look at Putin's visit to China, and really what really stood out for you as a diplomat, that not just the military walk past, the military procession. I mean, I'm an 80s and 90s kid. We used to see that every year. It's nothing new to me. It didn't really stand out. But I'm interested in your view because you're a former diplomat. What stood out for you?
Right, Shaun, you've said a number of things there that I'm like to comment on. First, the first thing I think I would say about the meeting, I did my first interview back in about 15th of January 2022, so over a month before the full-scale invasion went in. And almost from the start, I have been trying to articulate not just why we must support Ukraine and the threat to Ukraine being legally invaded and genocidally invaded, as it has turned out. Not just that, but the threat to Western democracy, the threat to our way of life, the threat to what we call our rules-based order. And I have really felt I've been banging my head against a stone wall, and many, many people have said, oh, there's no such thing as a rules-based order. Look at Iraq and weapons of mass destruction, and look at Vietnam, and look at everything else. Right, let's get something absolutely straight. The rules-based order is what has pertained since the end of the Second World War, 1945, for 80 years now. It has been responsible for a group of democratic countries centered around Europe, but also North America and I would say Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, and Australia, maybe one or two others, for giving the world the longest period of peace, prosperity, and security that we have ever known. Is it perfect? Has it been perfect? No, absolutely not. We have made mistakes. Our leaders have made mistakes, but as democracies, we are capable of learning from our mistakes and putting them right. What I have been trying to articulate from the start is there's two reasons to support Ukraine. There's a moral reason, which is obvious, and we don't need to go into that right now. But if Ukraine doesn't matter to you, and unfortunately it doesn't matter sufficiently to a lot of people, this wolf will come to your door, is what I have been telling people. It's a threat to our rules-based order, which is our way of life. And I have been saying long before most people started using it, I've been talking about the axis of evil. And that axis, the core axis of evil, was always Iran, North Korea, Russia as a junior partner to China. And I have been emphasizing that from the very
Mm.
start. I have noticed, and I consider myself the little guy compared to, a lot of far more senior retired generals and diplomats and politicians and so forth. Probably in the last year, I have heard a lot more big voices talk about this axis of evil. And we know that China and Iran and North Korea have been providing lethal force to Ukraine to prosecute their war in, or to Russia rather, to prosecute their war in Ukraine. So going back to last week's meeting, we saw Xi Jinping flanked by Vladimir Putin and the leader, the despotic leader of North Korea, both of their hands blood-soaked.
Mm.
There were a variety of other despots at that meeting, but very, very significantly, we saw Modi of India. Now, India is doing two things. India is continuing to buy Russia's oil, but India, supposedly the world's largest democracy of, I think, 1.3 billion people. There's more than a touch of the autocrats about Narendra Modi.
Mm.
This is very concerning indeed. So this is almost like this axis is being emboldened, and we have that core axis. But I had always said that there was other countries in the south and other members of the BRICS who were only waiting to fall in on Russia's side should things go well enough. So I think from that point of view, this is very, very concerning.
Mm.
We know that the Chinese take a very, very long-term view, and we know that they have a clear view on world domination in terms of see themselves replacing the role of the United States and so forth. So I think we are in a difficult position at the moment. I think what we saw in China last week was effectively a lifeline being thrown to Putin, and we can go on in a minute to talk about the pressures that Russia is on. So I think it was concerning. I think our leaders need to take note of this.
Mm.
If Ukraine was to fall, or if Putin is to be handed any form of a victory, which would include along the current um, proposals of Donald Trump, where Ukraine should not only cede the land that's already occupied, but should cede the rest of the four oblasts which Putin has declared forever Russia. This would give Putin something that he could present to his people as a victory, and this would be a given the weakening position of America on the world stage. This, I believe, would be a red rag to a bull to Xi Jinping with his
Mm,
ambitions in Taiwan. So very, very dangerous indeed. And in terms of the rules-based order, I've said we're imperfect, but where has the best where has the best quality of life for the last 80 years been? It's
mm,
been it's been in Europe and one or two other countries that I have mentioned. This is not imagined. This is life expectancy. This is this is survival in childbirth. This
mm,
is standard of living. This is any of the health factors. The greatest standard of living. It's democracy. It's freedom of speech. It's all that. It's been in Europe and one or two other countries. Look at the sort of rights that people have in China, in North Korea, in Iran, and in Russia, of course. Do we want a world continue to be dominated by our old order that has stood for 80 years? And as I said, as democracies, we should be capable of learning from our mistakes and fixing it. Or do we want a new world order, which people, including Trump, have made very, very clear that they want to move from a bipolar world to a multipolar world? Um, I think people need to see that choice. The unfortunate thing in the West is most of us have grown up very, very cosseted. We've had it soft. We
mm,
don't know what it's actually like. I learned when I first went to Ukraine, when I started to really meet and get to know Ukrainian people, what it was like to grow up in unfreedom, what it
mm.
was like to grow up in the Soviet Union without freedom. These are things that most of us in the West have grown up to take for granted. So there's a huge threat to our rules-based order. I think it was underlined last week. I think in the short term, the greatest winner out of last week was Vladimir Putin.
Mm.
Um, but it's not too late for us to change the trajectory of what comes out of that meeting. Sorry, I've talked for a lot, so
That's it. No,
do.
I'm fast. I could listen to you all day, and I think that brings us on to the next point. To be honest, I mean, we're looking at Ukrainian strikes and the recent
Mm,
attacks on the Russian oil refineries. I mean, I've been telling people it's exceptionally bad in Russia at the moment. The economy is teetering. There's queues for fuel. This is what they describe as the gas station with nukes who can't get fuel to its own pumps at the moment. So, this is what's fueling the war. The money coming in, the revenues from the shadow fleets and the oil. So, I mean, these have made big headlines this week. What do you think the strategic impact overall of these attacks are going to be, and how will it affect Russia going forward?
I think the strategic impact is significant. This is finally bringing the war home to the Russian people. It's estimated that as much as 20% of Russia's oil production capacity has been affected or taken out of operation. What was once Russia's great strength, the absolute massive size
Mm,
of the country, Ukrainians have turned into a weakness because it is simply the country is too vast for them to be able to defend all of their oil refineries. What's significant also is we had um, we had the ridiculous situation over the last 2 years where Ukraine was not allowed to use long-range Western weapons to strike logistic targets behind Russia's borders. So Ukraine has gone ahead and they've developed their own long-range drones, and they're soon to come out with something. I keep calling it the flamingo. It's the pelican, of course. the Pelican missile. We can talk about that maybe
No, I think
separately in
it
a
is.
moment because it's
I thought it
really,
was
really interesting.
I thought it was the flamingo because of the pink
It is.
warhead.
It is
Yeah,
the flamingo. It is
yeah,
the flamenco. I'm sorry.
yeah,
I
yeah.
keep getting mixed up. So I've been joking that it's the flamenco. Let the flamencos
The
fly.
prototype had a pink warhead or
Yeah,
something like that, didn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, there's an apocryphal story. We're not. I was talking to my friend Philip Ingram about this during the week. We're not quite sure, but for whatever reason, it's now called the flamenco. Look, there is a myth of Russian invincibility that needs to be finally crushed. History has told us Russia is not invincible. They lost the Crimean War. They then went on to lose a war against Japan. They then went on to lose the First World War, despite starting on the winning side at a loss of, millions of
Mm.
men. They would have only prevailed in the Second World War um, because of American and Allied help supplying them. They were beaten in Afghanistan. They were beaten in the 1938 Winter War when they went into Finland. So, Russia is not invincible, and Ukraine is proving again that Russia is not invincible. They're, fighting a country three and a half, four times their size, and we can talk about the failure of Putin's summer offensive again. So I think the significance of the strikes on oil have been absolutely significant. We are hearing stories of queues of over a mile long all over the Russian Federation. We're hearing of fights breaking out between people. We're hearing of people stealing fuel off each other. Imagine Russians stealing. Isn't that amazing? So this is bringing it home to the Russian people. We have many, many other indicators that the Russian economy is in dire straits. So this is good because I said in another interview earlier on the week, the one thing probably that Putin fears most is the Russian people.
Mm.
Um, so there's
You only have to see the standard of equipment that the police and the special services have got in Moscow and St. Petersburg to what they're dishing out to the guys on the front line. I mean, they've got the state-of-the-art bone-crushing equipment and everything in Moscow and St. Petersburg. You just have to see the police and you go, well, that's where his threat. That's where he thinks his
well,
threat's coming from.
clearly, there's an unwritten agreement between Putin and the middle classes in Moscow and St. Petersburg
Yep,
that
I was
they
talking
won't be
about that last
drafted.
week. Yep.
Yeah, and I think the big threat is the day that Putin drafts them. Now we know that Putin is running out of men. We know that for most of this year he has been taking losses of in the region of 1,000 men per day, killed and injured. And these, very significantly, these are figures from Ukraine's Ministry of Defense,
Mm.
which what we've seen in the last year is we've seen Western sources catch right up, and we now see Western sources broadly agreeing with what the Ukrainians are telling us is happening, where near the start of the war, Western sources or intelligence were tending to suggest that the Ukrainians were massively overestimating. I think we now know that we're not. So I think Putin is under huge pressure. Um, but I've been saying from the very start, we need to sanction Russia back to the Stone Age and arm Ukraine to the teeth. Well, we still have not. We still have a long way to go on sanctions. We still have not gone out after the shadow fleet, and we could still do an awful lot more with secondary sanctions. And to remind people, it fluctuates, but despite sanctions, Russia is still earning in the region of $20
Billion.
billion every month from the export of petrochemicals.
Mm.
And that is the money that is fueling the war machine. So we can do a lot to put the pressure on Putin there. And clearly, um, we can we can do a lot more to arm Ukraine properly. What we have done for most of the last 3.5 years is give Ukraine too little, too late, and with handcuffs on.
Yeah,
Um,
I was just saying on social media today, I said we're too responsive. We've always got restrictions on it. We've had
yeah,
restrictions of Biden. I mean, I got into an argument with someone on social media today saying, look, Biden's policies weren't great and he put tons of restrictions on us, but he didn't stop the arms coming in to be able to fight. That was Trump. That was the year-long artillery drought we had. That was Trump stopping those artillery rounds after
That's
the
right.
Russians coming in. It's
Before
since,
before he even became president,
yeah,
by virtue of his control over Mike Johnson, who was the House Speaker. Um,
absolutely.
And, we have one of the lessons, from, I think, from Anchorage
We're just
a
losing
few
you
weeks
because
ago.
of the sun coming through your window there a minute. I could have just about see it.
Hang on 1 second. How's that?
No, still can't see it. Sun's coming right into the
How's
right into
that?
the that'll do. We're good.
You sure?
Yeah, that's better.
Hang
Oh,
on.
that's perfect.
There
Yeah,
we
there we
go.
go.
There we go.
There we go.
Can't see as much of the flag then. Sorry about that.
It's all
Right,
right.
Sean, I'm
I was just
sorry.
losing you as
Where
you
are
were
we?
talking. It was
Yeah,
just like
yeah,
disappearing.
yeah. I think what I wanted to say, the one lesson that Western leaders need to learn after Anchorage is Donald Trump can no longer have any credibility whatsoever.
No.
He has his various promises to get peace with Russia have achieved absolutely nothing. There
Yeah,
is nothing to suggest that Vladimir Putin's um, objectives have changed one iota from the start, and
absolutely.
that is to effectively wipe Ukraine off the face of the earth. In terms of and any Ukrainian who would stand against him and to obliterate Ukrainian national identity. He has said on many times that he doesn't believe Ukraine is a real country. And
Absolutely.
there is absolutely nothing, the terms that he has suggested, which up to recently Donald Trump seemed to be going along with, were tantamount to capitulation for Ukraine. They
Absolutely.
were terms that either President Zelensky or the Ukrainian people never could or never would accept.
Well, they were surrender terms,
Um,
weren't they? At
yeah,
the end of the
they
day.
were. They were. And there was an interesting survey out recently which was published with the very, very disingenuous headline that support for the war effort in Ukraine was collapsing because
Yeah,
68% of Ukrainian people said that they favored a negotiated peace settlement soon. Well, I was surprised that only 68% of Ukrainians would favor a negotiated peace settlement because, Shaun, you're out there, but I don't know a single Ukrainian who hasn't lost somebody in
absolutely.
in this war, and I know that you are all absolutely worn out. And
Yeah,
people talk about Ukraine fatigue in the West. We have no right to feel fatigued. And I always go back to what a great friend of mine, Alexei Mikheyev, said. He's now the ambassador out in Berlin, and he has, whether Alexei was the first one to say it or not, I don't know, but he was the first one to say it to me. And he said to me in a call like this one Sunday morning, early in March 22, he said, Cormac, it's very simple. If Russia stops fighting, there will be no war.
mm.
If Ukraine stops fighting, there will be no Ukraine. And you, above all else, know what Putin did in Mariupol. And, this was a city of 500,000 people has been wiped off the map.
We do. I sit there. I
Conservative.
tell people that what his principles for evading. I'm a Russian speaker from East Ukraine. I was born in London, but my first language was Russian, not Ukrainian. And so was our community. The Ukrainians who spoke Russian and Ukrainian who predominantly spoke Russian, only because Russians didn't know Ukrainian, and there was a lot of them in Mariupol. Around there would come on holiday to the Azov Sea and stuff. So I'm a big advocate of someone who, even today, certain social media propaganda people saying that, Russia's banned. What do you think I speak in Dnipro? What do you think people in Dnipro speak? It's
Look,
not banned.
Sean, I had this exact same conversation, and I've been having a lot of conversations about disinformation recently. So, again, going back to the same friend who I just quoted, we sat down around the same time and said, let's identify the five biggest lies, pieces of disinformation narratives that the Kremlin pumps out and that useful idiots everywhere and Kremlin assets amplify. And these were, of course, the old one. It was NATO expansion,
Yeah.
which caused the invasion. It was not.
How's that
The
gone?
Maidan. The Maidan, as you know, was a US-backed coup. No, it was not.
Yeah.
There was, Ukraine is full of Nazis.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yes,
How can we forget that
right.
one?
Yeah.
It's like,
Donbass, of course, was a civil war, and the fifth was that there was effectively a
yeah.
genocide against the Russian-speaking minority. As you know, Ukraine is a bilingual country. But what I explained to some friends over lunch the other day, I gave the example of Mariupol, and I talked about you as a friend who had fought through it and been captured, etc. And Mariupol, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, was not only a Russian-speaking city, but it was a city where the local politics were probably quite well disposed towards Russia and quite pro-Russian before the war broke out.
Yeah, yeah, I would say that. I mean, it was, I described Yurivka and Azov as where the home and away supporters went on holiday together. I mean, it was,
Yeah,
lots of drink, lots of fights, Russians, Ukrainians. It was just normal. I mean, it was plenty of Russians
yeah,
there. But I mean, there were some sympathizers there, mainly older generation. The younger generation
yeah.
wanted to move away and towards Europe. They didn't want to be a part of that. And I keep telling people, you don't have 6 million, over 6 million forced refugees by people that are embracing the invading country. That's not how it works. They don't want to be a part of Russia. Ukraine, even Mariupol, just before the invasion, was having, huge Ukrainian flags and marches in Mariupol.
But
The rest of,
Shaun, the other thing I've got to tell you from here, and I know you get back to the UK fairly regularly, and you're speaking to people, myself included, here all the time. But the other thing I've got to tell you is, the horrible atrocities which Russia carries out on a daily basis.
Mm,
And I was part of a piece of research recently. Most people don't even remember Bucha. Most people don't remember Mariupol or the significance of Mariupol. It's only 3 years ago since these
it's
things
true.
happened. So it doesn't land in people. And we've got to, I have another friend, a Ukrainian diplomat working in The Hague. And every time I ring him up or message him to say, what's the latest on the number of war crimes being investigated by Ukraine's prosecutor general, it's gone up by thousands. The last time I
Yeah.
spoke to him, it was 181,000
I mean,
war crimes
it's
are
every
being
day here.
investigated.
Is that even
You
this
know?
week they hit a mine action group?
Yeah.
This was a rocket attack. A drone was over the top of them, all white vehicles, clearing mines, and waff, straight rockets straight into them. It's just
So,
the
I
world's got
ask
used
people,
to the war crimes. I mean, it's sad
well,
to say, but they're getting used to the war crimes. It's dreadful.
I ask people to imagine, people who think that Ukraine should exchange land for peace. And as you know, it's not just the land, and it's not just the wealth or the minerals or and the resources on that land. Most importantly, it's the people who live
Mm.
on that land. And I ask those people, how many of your fellow citizens would you be willing to abandon to systematic torture, rape, murder, kidnap? Because that's what happened in
That's what
Bucha for the
happened.
world to see. It's what happened in Mariupol. It's what's
Yeah.
happening everywhere that Russia occupies.
Honestly,
And
I don't hold back anymore. I mean, it's genocide, straight for the word go. There were Nazi-style concentration camps. I refer to them as because it was. I mean, the closest thing you've ever seen to it was probably the Nazi camps in World War II. There were civilians and military in there. Anybody that could be perceived to be Ukrainian was picked up, brought in, tortured. Some didn't make it out. Some were killed in captivity. I mean, we haven't seen this since World War Two, and you have to use words like that to get people even interested now in it. And I
Sean,
shouldn't
listen,
be doing.
yeah, Sean, I didn't come on here to boast, so this is not what I'm doing. And I've got recordings. I was predicting this would be genocide from late
Mm,
January 22, because I was saying something very simple. I said, this guy will have no compunction with murdering tens of thousands of
yeah.
innocent people because he has done it in Aleppo and he has done it in Grozny and he will do it in a city or cities in Ukraine. And the first major one he did was obviously the one you know very well, was in
Mm,
Mariupol. I also had a conversation with three senior Ukrainian diplomats, two of them lawyers, within the first couple of weeks of the war, and we were having a discussion about why they would not use the term genocide. And I said, well, I don't have the restrictions you have. I'm using the word
Yeah,
genocide. And they agreed, yes, you can use the word genocide. A week after that, Zelensky used the word genocide for the first time. What Russia has been doing in Ukraine, and I will just ask anybody to Google the United Nations Charter on Genocide Convention. I'm sorry, the United Nations Convention on Genocide has 5 tests, and Russia has been passing every 5 tests for 3.5 years. Look up the great Professor Timothy Snyder out of Yale University, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, authority on Ukraine outside Ukraine, and see what Timothy Snyder has to say on genocide.
good point. Yeah,
It is what Russia has been doing. And we need to wake up to this, because I've been long saying there's 2 reasons we have to support Ukraine. There is the moral reason that a European country is having genocide carried out in 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. I've been saying it now. I'm in my 4th year of saying it. And I said this, even if you don't care, and unfortunately, many of us don't, and the research I was involved with that we launched earlier on this week bore this out. People don't have the bandwidth, they don't have they don't have the awareness, but it's the cost of living, it's their taxes, it's various problems that are closer to home. If Russia is to succeed in Ukraine in any way, we're given a break and let hold the land that they have. They will rest, they will rearm, and they will come back for more. And they will not stop at Ukraine. I worked for a foreign minister in Pavlo Klimkin who told the world this in early 2017, that Russia would not stop with Ukraine, that the article is still online from The Guardian. The world needs to see the world through Ukrainian eyes.
I do.
Or through Ukrainian spectacles. And it's, and we have the point we've got to now. America's lost
Yeah, it's
for the
gone.
duration of this
Agree.
Trump organization, and our leaders, including our Prime Minister in the UK, Keir Starmer, have been bending over backwards to try and court his favor. And I don't blame them for it. But I think what has come out of the Friday meeting in Alaska, followed by the Monday meeting in the White House with the European leaders, is that Donald Trump is not going to pivot against Russia. He has yet to impose any sanctions on Vladimir Putin at all. In Europe, we are on our own. It is down to us to sort this out. And things are not all bad. Because if you look at them, I don't have the latest figures, but at the start of this war, Ukraine was providing very, very little of its own armaments. And all you were getting from us was lightweight anti-tank stuff like the British NLAWs and the American Javelins. I believe, and I've spoken to military friends of mine, that they were the saving of Kyiv and they were the winning of the Battle of Kyiv. But, initially Ukraine needed modern battle tanks, they needed F-16 fighter jets, and they needed long-range artillery. They've got those, they've been drip-fed those, and they've never been given enough. And they've been given them with handcuffs on. Well, the situation has changed significantly.
Mm.
Ukraine is now producing over 40% of the armaments that it uses. And that, I understand, is rising daily. And there are a significant number of Western countries who are now investing heavily in Ukraine's defense industry. And our own defense industries in the West and in the UK and Germany and France in particular have turned up their production very, very significantly. But this is something that doesn't happen overnight. We probably started doing it towards the end of last year, mid last year. We should have started doing this in 2022 at the
No,
at the
absolutely.
at the beginning. So this is now very much down to Europe. And I always love to remind people of the irony that 600 million Europeans are asking 330 million Americans to protect them from 140 million Russians who can't even defeat 40 million Ukrainians. And Europe, when you talk about the EU and non-aligned non-EU countries like Britain, has when you put them together, and of course Britain is absolute and has always been to the forefront of defending and supporting Ukraine. When you put the European economies together, we are over 10 times the size of the Russian economy,
We
which
should
is
be
smaller,
trouncing them.
smaller than Italy's, smaller than Italy's. So, what do we need to do? I think it's very simple. I think people like myself need to probably accept that we're going to have to pay more taxes, and we have to accept that maybe we're going to see a reduction in some of our public services because we are simply not at the level of defense spending that we're going to need to be on a sustained level
Absolutely.
if we are going to beat Russia. And our military leaders are telling us, some are telling us we need to be ready for a battle with Russia by the end of this year, next year, but certainly there's a consensus that by the end of this decade, Europe needs to be ready to fight a war with Russia.
Yeah, they won't
So,
stop.
to give you, to give, and anybody in the West listening to this, and anyone who's going to come up with the, well, you know, if you're so enthusiastic about it, why not I go and fight in the front line and that usual stuff that we get from useful idiots? I do what I can. And if I have to pay more tax, I'll pay more tax. Because quite simply, and I believe this, it is our money and guns today or our daughters and sons tomorrow.
It
Because
is.
today, Ukraine is doing the fighting, bleeding, and dying for all of us.
I just want
I
to
was,
touch on one thing because we're getting quite close to it now. We can talk for hours and hours and hours. Igor Girkin's just sent out a letter. He's pretty much said that Putin's failed in his SMO. And I'll just read you some of the things he said. He said the current SMO format is exhausted and can't deliver victory over Ukraine. Moscow pushes for new borders, prove it. Another thing he said was abandoning. They couldn't hold on to Kherson and Zaporozhye. Shows the Kremlin can't win on the battlefield. Costly tactical gains mean nothing. Kiev won't concede unless defeated. Our forces cannot defeat them. And the list went on. How important do you think Igor Girkin's comments are, considering he's the orchestrator and started this whole thing off in 2014 for who else? Vladimir Putin.
well, I said earlier on in this chat with you that what Putin fears most is the Russian people. I was corrected by a good friend of mine in The Hague, actually, who said, "Well, no, it's not the Russian people. It's the elites and the other oligarchs that he really fears most." And he said, "But the
Yeah,
most
certainly.
dangerous job in history has been to be the Tsar of Russia." So I think if I were Vladimir Putin, I would be concerned about that. I was looking before I spoke to you. Russia has probably in the last 3 months taken 0.3% of Ukrainian land. In the last 1,000 days, Russia has only captured 1% of Ukrainian land. We know that they have been doing that at a cost, sometimes over the last 2 years, of as many as 2,000 casualties a day. The casualties, I don't think, have ever really consistently fallen below 1,000 a day. Russia is running at nearly 1.1 million casualties since the 24th of February 2022. This is, again, there's this great myth that there's no hardship that the Russian people, great enough that the Russian people can't take. I think we need to, one, our Western leaders need to bust this myth of Russian invincibility. But if I were Putin, I would be worried. I'm not sure. Maybe you'll tell me which is it. Is it going to be an uprising, or is he going to fall at the hands of his inner sanctum in the Kremlin? Probably the latter is more likely, from what my Ukrainian friends are
My
telling me.
my money's on a
But
Gorbachev moment, to be
yeah,
fair.
yeah, Russia will not accept defeat, and
Mm.
Putin has utterly failed in his initial objectives. We have a real problem with much of the Western media in how they're reporting this.
Mm.
They over-report Russian advances. They They indulge the myth of Russian invincibility, and they don't give nearly enough time to Ukrainian successes. In many, many ways, Ukraine is winning this war, and it's for us in the West to put the boot in, to use a term, as I say, to finish off
Finish them
sanctioning
off.
Russia, sanction them properly, and arm them to the teeth. Russia's down. It's time to put the boot in, I'd suggest.
I hope you come back again because we could have another chat, and I think that would be really good because there's so much we could talk about, and I think we'll wrap it up there because that's a good way to end on. Totally, I totally agree with you. Sometimes because I'm sitting here and largely amounts months and months on my own. I don't get the only time I get to see people is like you when I come back to England and we visit, or we have a beer, or we have a chat and catch up, and all on a Zoom call. So it's really good to hear you saying and saying this really the same things I'm sort of preaching. Really, thanks very
Look,
much for talking.
Shaun, look, I will come on and talk to you anytime. I'll talk to you anytime anyway. But in terms of this and building your YouTube, because you have a you have a credibility and an authenticity which is very, very rare. That's very hard to argue with. And I think as you and I have got to know each other through this horrible situation, we can, I think it would be good if we go online to discuss the big issues of the day relating to the war in a very, very honest and no holds
Absolutely,
barred fact. And I think, if that helps to clarify the situation for a few more people each week or each month, then, please God, we're achieving something. But I'm always happy to
absolutely.
join you.
Slava Ukraine.
Orium Slava.
Have a good evening, buddy. Thanks very much
Before you
again.
go,
Go on.
have you turned the recording off?
Not yet.
Turned it off. No,
I'm keeping that.
I'm
I'm
just.
keeping that in. I'm keeping
That's
that
fine.
in.
That's fine. No, I was just going to say let's have a very quick chat
Yeah,
before you
okay
go.
then. Okay, well, say goodbye to everybody else. Let me turn this thing on.